The string lights glittered above me like 1,000 frozen mocking stars. Their delicate, golden glow was reflected in the untouched glasses of champagne that formed a shimmering, silent army across the linen-draped tables. I stood on the small, raised platform meant to be a stage for our joy, my hands shaking around a microphone that had grown impossibly heavy. It was a prop in a play that had no audience. Every table in the hall was set for a celebration that had not arrived. Candles flickered in tall glass cylinders, their flames dancing for no one. Deep red roses, my mother's choice, not mine, stood in stiff, formal arrangements. Place cards were written in her perfect, looping cursive, names of people who were nothing more than ghosts in empty chairs. The air smelled of beeswax and expectation, and the crushing scent of my own failure. My mother's voice, cold and smooth as polished stone, cut through the hollow silence from the front row. Beautiful, isn't it? She didn't even bother to hide her smirk. It was a familiar expression, one I'd seen in the mirror of her eyes my whole life. All this for no one. Maybe that should tell you something, Lily. I blinked, forcing back the hot, sharp sting behind my eyes. People are probably on their way, I whispered into the dead mic before finding my voice. Traffic. Oh, don't embarrass yourself further, she cut in, a light, cruel laugh escaping her lips. It echoed in the vast, empty space, a sound that had punctuated every childhood stumble, every teenage heartbreak. You really thought people would show up to your engagement? Please, you're not that important. To my left, my father didn't look up from his phone, his brow furrowed, as if the stock market's fluctuations were a more pressing tragedy than the dismantling of his daughter's heart. My sister, Sophie, leaned against a marble pillar, examining her nails before whispering something to her husband that made them both laugh softly into their hands. It all felt choreographed, a scene rehearsed for the sole purpose of my humiliation. I looked down at the ring on my finger. It was simple, a band of silver, a small, clear stone. It was a promise I had clutched onto like a lifeline, a symbol of a future I thought was mine. A future away from this. My fiancé, Leo, was supposed to have arrived 20 minutes ago. Maybe longer. My chest tightened, a familiar vice of anxiety squeezing the air from my lungs. My mother stepped closer, her perfume, a thick, cloying floral, washing over me, a sweet mask for the venom in her tone. Face it, Lily, you've always been the afterthought. The quiet one, the easy one to forget. She gestured vaguely at the empty room. Even your fiancé probably realized what everyone else already knows. That he can do better. The words lodged in my throat, sharp as shattered glass. I took a step back, my knuckles white around the microphone stand. My hands were ice cold. When I spoke, my voice was softer than I wanted, but it was steady, a new and unfamiliar anchor in the storm. You don't get to define my worth, Mom. I said the words to the room, to the empty chairs, to myself. Not tonight. Her perfectly sculpted brows arched in amusement. Worth. Honey, worth is what fills seats. Worth is what draws a crowd. Look around you. What do you see? The hall went silent again, save for the low, relentless hum of the air conditioning, a mechanical sigh. And then, a sound began to thread its way through that hum, a deep, growing rumble from outside. Engines. Not one, not two, but a chorus of them. The vibration carried through the marble floor, a subtle tremor that made the champagne flutes shiver and chime softly against each other. My mother's head snapped toward the double doors. A frown creased her flawless forehead. What is that? She murmured, her confidence faltering for a single, precious second. Headlights, bright and numerous, flashed through the frosted glass of the entrance, painting the walls with sweeping arcs of light. The sound grew louder, not the sputtering of old cars, but the confident, powerful purr of well-tuned engines. My heart began to pound, a frantic, hopeful drum against my ribs. Then the doors opened, not just one, but both, swung inward with a weighty, decisive motion by two men in dark, tailored suits. A motorcade of black SUVs was lined along the curved driveway, their headlights cutting beams through the evening gloom. Security personnel stepped in first, their presence immediate and imposing, earpieces glinting under the chandelier's cold fire. And then the guests began to stream in. Not the casual friends and distant relatives my mother had deemed unworthy of invitations. These were men in exquisitely cut suits that spoke of boardrooms, not department stores. Women in gowns of understated elegance, their postures straight, their gazes assured. They moved into the hall with a quiet confidence that seemed to shrink the room, their collective presence rewriting the very atmosphere. A wave of gasps rippled from the front row where my family sat, their smugness replaced by stunned confusion. And then he walked in, Leo. But not the Leo the first knew in his comfortable sweaters and slightly frayed jeans. This was a Leo in a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, its black fabric absorbing the light. He moved with an authority I had only ever seen glimpses of, his shoulders set, his gaze scanning the room until it found me on the stage. Behind him, more figures emerged from the cars. I recognized a city councilwoman I'd seen on the news, the owner of the largest tech firm in the state. And then a man with the same steady jawline and calm eyes as Leo, his father, Alistair Reed, the reclusive billionaire philanthropist whose name was synonymous with quiet, immense power. My mother's face drained of all color, leaving her makeup stark and sudden against her skin. "Wait," she whispered, the sound barely audible. "That's Alistair Reed." Leo reached me in 3 long, sure strides. He gently took the microphone from my trembling hand, his fingers brushing mine. A touch that was both an apology and a promise. His voice, when he spoke, was calm and steady, filling the hall without effort. "Sorry we're late," he said, his gaze sweeping over my stunned family before returning to me. The airport was a mess, and coordinating the motorcade took longer than anticipated. He then looked directly at my mother, his expression not cruel, but utterly matter-of-fact. "Mrs. Carter, I told Lily we wanted to keep things simple tonight, but my family insisted on making it public. They don't really do small events." The silence that followed was deafening, a void where my family's judgment used to live. He turned back to me, his voice softening, meant only for my ears. "You ready to start the real engagement party now?" And in that single, suspended moment, standing in the same hall that had felt like a gilded cage minutes before, the world tilted on its axis. The pity I had felt for myself evaporated, replaced by a dawning, thunderous understanding. I wasn't the one who should have been pitied. The air in the hall turned electric, charged with a new, unspoken hierarchy. Leo kept my hand in his thumb tracing slow, calming circles on my skin. My mother stood frozen beside her chair, her glass of champagne trembling, the bubbles rising in a frantic, silent panic. You're a Reed," she stammered, the name itself seeming to cost her something. "Alistair Reed's son." Leo gave a polite, almost imperceptible nod. "Leo Reed." "Yes." My father's flight from Geneva was delayed. We didn't want Lily to spend a moment of her engagement party feeling alone. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. It seems we were just in time. That single line, "We didn't want Lily to feel alone," was a quiet earthquake, its aftershocks cracking the foundation of my family's world. My mother's smirk was a ghost, a memory of expression she could no longer afford. My father finally put his phone away, his face a mask of recalculating. My sister's feigned boredom had vanished, replaced by a wide-eyed, desperate curiosity as she watched the powerful newcomers gravitate toward us. They didn't glance at my family. They came straight to me. "Miss Carter," a woman with silver hair and a kind, sharp face said, taking my free hand. "Leo's told us so much about your work with the community literacy program. It's an honor to finally meet you." I blinked, stunned. He has?" Leo smiled from beside me. "Maybe too much." My mother found her voice again, a brittle, forced sound. "You could have told us who your family was," she said, attempting a laugh that came out as a strangled cough. "We would have made proper arrangements." Leo turned toward her, his politeness a sharp, polished blade. "Mrs. Carter, if I had told you this would have been a business transaction, not a celebration. Lily didn't need arrangements. She needed sincerity." The weight of his words settled over the table. My mother's lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. My father cleared his throat, puffing out his chest in a pathetic attempt to reclaim authority. "Well, Leo," he said stiffly, "you should have let us handle the invitations. It seems there was some confusion." I looked around the hall. Every table, once a monument to my isolation, was now filled with people who weren't there because of my family's social standing, but because of Leo's belief in me. The irony was sweeter than the champagne. Confusion? Leo's tone remained calm, but his gaze was unwavering. "You mean the fact that Lily's own engagement party had no guests from her side? That kind of confusion?" My father flinched, caught. "I think," Leo said evenly, "it's exactly what I think. But that's fine. I came prepared." He gave a slight nod to one of the security team. Instantly, the hall was filled with a new, efficient energy. Staff in crisp uniforms began wheeling in new catering carts, bearing the insignia of a legendary, impossible-to-book chef. Extravagant floral arrangements of white gardenias and eucalyptus, my favorites, replaced the formal roses. Elegant gift boxes, stamped with a subtle, embossed R, were placed at every setting. the air filled with the fresh, intoxicating scent of the gardenias. My mother whispered under her breath, a desperate, broken sound. "This can't be happening." "Oh, but it is," I said, the words leaving my lips before I could stop them. One of Leo's associates, a woman with a commanding presence, took the stage microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice warm and clear, "thank you for joining us on such short notice. We are truly honored to be here tonight to celebrate the engagement of Mr. Leo Reed and Miss Lily Carter." Applause erupted. Real, robust, heartfelt applause. The sound was a balm, washing over the raw, exposed nerves of the last hour. My throat tightened with an emotion so profound it felt like pain. Leo held out his hand to me. "Come on," he said quietly, his eyes holding mine. "You deserve to have your moment. Your real moment." I took his hand. As we stepped onto the stage together, the lights seemed to warm, casting a golden glow instead of a harsh glare. Cameras flashed, but they felt celebratory now, not invasive. Leo slipped an arm around my waist, his touch respectful and steady, a silent reminder that this was not about power or revenge, but about being seen for the first time. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone, his voice firm and filled with a quiet emotion that stilled the room. "Tonight isn't about wealth, or status, or last names. It's about recognizing someone who has been overlooked for far too long. Someone who has shown me more about quiet strength and genuine kindness than anyone I've ever met in a world of calculated gestures and loud ambitions." My mother's expression, from my vantage point on the stage, finally shattered. The porcelain mask of superiority cracked, revealing the bewildered woman beneath. He turned to me, his voice softening further, "Meant for me alone, yet heard by all." When I met Lily, she was working 2 jobs, spending her weekends tutoring kids who'd been left behind, and still managing to find beauty in a rainy day. She was the first person who looked at me, Leo, not Leo Reed. And I knew right then that she wasn't just someone I wanted to marry. She was the person I needed to become better for. A hush swept the hall, so complete you could hear the flicker of the candle flames. The emotion in my chest swelled, hot and bright. I blinked fast, tears of pride, not hurt, welling in my eyes. When I looked at my parents, I saw their eyes darting between each other, a frantic, silent communication of regret and dawning horror. My mother forced a laugh, a desperate, hollow sound. "Oh well, that's our Lily for you," she called out, trying to claw back a shred of relevance. Always full of surprises. Leo didn't even glance in her direction. "I'm sure she has been," he said, his gaze never leaving my face. "And she's not done yet." He squeezed my hand. "Ready?" My brows furrowed. "For what?" He nodded to the back of the room. The lights dimmed, and a large, sleek screen I hadn't noticed before illuminated the wall behind us. A video began to play, a montage of photos and clips Leo had secretly compiled. Me laughing with children at the library, my face alight with joy. Me organizing a donation drive, my brow furrowed in concentration. Time lapses of my paintings, the canvases transforming from blank voids into explosions of color and life. Moments I'd thought were insignificant, private, unseen. Tears finally spilled over, tracing warm paths down my cheeks. He had seen me, all of me. He leaned close, his whisper a secret in the dark. "I told my foundation's media team the world should see the woman I'm marrying, not the version some people tried to shrink into an empty chair." The video ended on a single, powerful photograph. Me kneeling on the floor of the community center, helping a small girl sound out a word in a book, our heads bent together in a world of our own. The caption beneath it read simply, "The future Mrs. Reed." The heart of our foundation. The applause that erupted this time was a roar. It was a validation that echoed in my bones. Cameras flashed like a constellation of approval. My mother stood stiffly, her hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles were white bone. My father's face was ashen. My sister stared at the screen, her mouth slightly agape, the illusion of her own superiority finally, irrevocably, broken. Leo raised my hand to his lips and kissed it gently, his eyes shining with a love that felt like victory. "Now they all know," he whispered, the words for me alone. "Who you are, and who they should have never underestimated." The crowd rose in a standing ovation. I looked out at the sea of faces, at the powerful, the influential, the kind, all here for us. And in the front row, my mother stood completely speechless, stripped of every cutting word, every dismissive glance, every weapon she had ever used against me. She had once told me no one would ever show up for me, but tonight, an entire world had. And as the sound of their applause washed over me, I realized the empty hall had not been my failure. It had been the blank page on which my true story was about to begin.